You want to become a monster, don't you? You think that's the way to survive in this world. You think that if you become cold enough, ruthless enough, strong enough, that nothing can touch you. You look at the people around you, the weak, the timid, the ones who bend and break, and you swear you'll never be like them. You won't be the prey. You'll be the predator. You'll rise above it all by becoming something darker, something harder, something monstrous. But let me tell you something. Become a monster, and sooner or later, you'll get eaten by one. You think power is about domination. You think it's about crushing anyone who stands in your way, about showing the world that you're untouchable. You believe that to survive, you have to kill off the parts of yourself that feel, that care, that hesitate. But what you don't realize is that every step you take toward becoming a monster takes you one step closer to your own destruction. Because monsters don't just live in the dark, they eat each other alive. The world's a brutal place, I get that. You've been hurt. You've been betrayed. You've been through things that have made you question everything, made you question yourself. And now you've decided that the only way to protect yourself is to become like the ones who hurt you. You think if you build enough walls, if you shut out enough people, if you harden yourself enough, you won't feel pain anymore. But becoming a monster doesn't protect you from pain. It magnifies it. The more you disconnect, the more you numb yourself to the world, the more you think you're in control. You tell yourself that you've beaten the system, that you've figured it out. You've built your armor, you've sharpened your claws, and now no one can hurt you. But monsters are never truly in control. They're slaves to their own darkness, their own hunger, their own rage. You think you can control that kind of power. You think you can walk that line without crossing over completely. You're lying to yourself. The truth is, becoming a monster changes you. It corrupts you from the inside out. You might start by thinking it's a choice, something you can turn on and off when you need it. But once you open that door, it's not so easy to close. You start by hurting the ones who hurt you. Sure, that makes sense, right? But it never stops there. Eventually, you start hurting the ones who get close to you. You start seeing threats where there are none. You start pushing away the people who care about you, because caring makes you weak, doesn't it? So you isolate yourself. You build a life of walls and armor and silence, thinking you've created a fortress. But all you've really done is build yourself a cage of your own making, where you can't trust anyone, not even yourself. Because the deeper you go into the darkness, the more you lose sight of who you really are. You forget what it's like to be human. You forget what it's like to feel anything other than rage, fear, and hunger. And here's the thing about monsters. They don't last. They devour everything in their path, including themselves. You think you're becoming stronger by cutting off your emotions, by shutting down your humanity. But you're not. You're just becoming hollow. The more monstrous you become, the more you lose the very thing that makes you capable of surviving in the long run. Your ability to connect, to feel, to care. That's what gives people real strength. But you're too blinded by your own desire for power to see it. Look at the monsters around you. They think they've won. They've built empires on fear, on cruelty, on domination. But watch closely. They're not thriving. They're destroying themselves. Bit by bit, they consume everything around them. And when there's nothing left to devour, they turn on each other. That's what monsters do. That's what they always do. They eat and they eat until there's nothing left. Then they eat themselves alive. And you think you're any different. You want to be feared. You want people to look at you and think twice before crossing you. You want that feeling of power that comes from knowing you can break anyone who stands in your way. But here's what you don't understand. Fear is a short-term game. Sure, it works in the beginning. People back down. People avoid you. People give you what you want. But over time, fear turns into hate. It turns into resentment. It festers. And eventually it'll come back around to you. When you become a monster, you don't just make enemies. You make enemies of everyone. Even the ones who follow you. Even the ones who claim to support you. They're just waiting for their chance to take you down. Because monsters don't inspire loyalty. They inspire fear. And fear is fleeting. It's unstable. The moment you show a crack in your armor, the moment you slip, there'll be 100 other monsters waiting to tear you apart. And they will. You'll get eaten alive by the very thing you became. There's no winning in that game. There's no victory. Because being a monster is a curse. It's a slow death. A descent into madness where you're constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly watching your back because you know deep down that eventually someone's going to come for you. That's what happens when you live by the law of the jungle. There's always a bigger, meaner, hungrier monster waiting just around the corner. You want to survive? You want to thrive? Then don't become a monster. Monsters burn bright, sure, but they burn out fast. They consume themselves in their own fire, their own rage, their own need to dominate. And in the end, they're left with nothing. No one, just ashes. You don't want that. You think you do, because right now it feels like the only way to protect yourself. But that path only leads to one place, your own destruction. Strength doesn't come from becoming something dark and twisted. Real strength comes from balance. From knowing when to fight and when to step back. From knowing when to defend yourself and when to let things go. It comes from being able to feel pain without letting it consume you. To face the darkness without becoming it. But you're running headfirst into the abyss. Thinking that if you go deep enough, you'll come out the other side stronger. You won't. You'll come out the other side broken if you come out at all. So what's it going to be? Do you really think you can control the monster inside you? Do you really believe you can dip your toes into that darkness without getting pulled under completely? Because once you start down that path, it's not so easy to stop. The monster in you will take more and more until there's nothing left of the person you used to be. You'll become a shell, a shadow, a puppet of your own rage. And by the time you realize it, it'll be too late. You'll have become the very thing you were trying to avoid. You'll have become the prey. That's the irony of becoming a monster. You think it makes you stronger, but all it really does is make you vulnerable. It isolates you. It leaves you with nothing but enemies, with no one to trust, no one to lean on when the world starts to close in. And eventually, it will. Eventually, the weight of being a monster will crush you. And when that day comes, there'll be no one left to save you. You'll be on your own, left to be devoured by the next predator in line. So go ahead, become a monster. See where it gets you. But remember this, the world is full of monsters, and there's always one waiting to take you down. You might think you're untouchable now, but sooner or later you'll get eaten by one. That's the price you pay for becoming the thing you hate.